the internet! Welcome back to another Friday Night Assembly. It is I, Don Thomas, back in here with another one. As always, folks, the likes, the comments, the subscribes are all greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for the support of this channel. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into tonight's topics, man. I got a story pulled up here. Of course, it comes again from the Diary of a CEO, entitled, Why Men Have No, quote, Real Friends. Looks like it's a conversation with Richard Reeves. Let's hear his thoughts. It's a 15-minute video. Of course, I may not watch the full thing in its entirety. Let's get some context as to the thought behind this. Of course, as you know, on this channel, of course, I covered some stories before in terms of men not wanting to work and men not having purpose and things of that nature. Again, I kind of argue that I feel like it's both men and women that are maybe fed up, not wanting to work. I'm hearing soft girl life, soft girl life, soft girl era, this, that, and the other. So I feel like maybe it's just a human thing, maybe where we're at in the world. But let's get the details from this video in particular. Again, shout out to Diary of a CEO. Videos entitled, Why Men Have No Real Friends. Let's find out.
Made 0 new friends in London in 5 years. Mm-hmm. My friends are my colleagues and my friends that I've had for 10 years. That is it. I don't make new friends. And this is something that I have echoed to me a lot when I meet men out and about, when I do talks and stuff and they come up to me after. I've had men whisper to me, how do I make friends where I'm lonely? And when they do it, they come really, really close so that the person behind them in the queue can't hear them say it.
I've had exactly the same experience.
And they whisper it about, how do I make friends where I'm feeling lonely or something like that. And I've heard in your work, the work that was in your book, I think on page 45, you say that there is a male friendship recession. What did you mean when you said that?
We're seeing a decline in friendships generally, but it's much more acute for men. So in the US, 15% of men under the age of 30 say they don't have a single close friend. That's up from 3% in 1990. The process of making and sustaining friends is just something that men are really struggling with right now, much more so than women. And I think there's a couple of things going on here. One is we're revealing the extent to which a lot of that work was actually outsourced to women before, right? So if you're in a couple, how often are the social arrangements made by the women? They do a lot of that maintenance, the relationship maintenance, and the men free ride on the women, right?
Every weekend plan that's outside of my comfort zone, pretty much most of them come from my partner.
All right, she's organized something.
She's an organizer. She wants to go try this thing.
Right. And you're
Let's go do vegan sushi roll.
I just want to play Far Cry 5. Or
I just want to lie on my back and watch Manchester United.
All right, fine. Exactly. I chose the wrong thing. But I don't. So I think and women have been better at it, and men haven't had to do as much of it. And so in some ways, I think we're being exposed a bit more in the sense that women aren't doing as much of that work for us anymore. They're saying, look, it's not my job to create your friendship network for you. So we're having to do it, and we're not very good at it. And we're certainly not very good at it yet. And I've had the same experience. I mean, I wrote a bit about loneliness, and I spoke at an event not that long afterwards, and I had a couple of young men, exactly the same as you, just come close and just say, I'm incredibly lonely.
Let's pause right there real quick. Men are suffering from loneliness. This has been a topic that I've been hearing more and more about, I want to argue and say since the pandemic. But it's been a conversation that's been being held more in the mainstream a lot more. I've been seeing in podcasts and social circles and things of that nature. Or just online social media, I should say. People, particularly young men, or I guess young to middle-aged men, saying that they don't have friends. Or that they're lonely, or that they, of course, single men, no girlfriends, having a hard time finding a girlfriend. Things of that nature. I want to be sensitive to this topic and not be biased because I'll say a couple things. Me personally, speaking for myself, I've grown to understand the true difference between lonely and alone. There is a difference. On the surface level, you might think nah, they're the same thing. I think it's one thing to be lonely. It's one thing to be alone. Here's what I mean. Lonely is an emotional state. Lonely is what you would describe to somebody as a feeling that you've been feeling. Oh, I've been feeling lonely. Right? It's an emotional state. It's the emotional state of the result of being alone. Whereas if you are alone, it's more so speaking to the physical, spatial sense. I am alone. Right now, I'm alone. In my apartment right now, I am alone. But am I lonely? No, I'm not. So there is a difference. I think people that are lonely are suffering from the effects of being alone. Again, not having friends, not being in a relationship, maybe not feeling like they have a purpose, whatever the case is. I've also come to understand, again, speaking for myself, I personally have found, studies have shown, personal studies have shown me, that I thrive in being alone. I'm at my best alone. It is a fact. It's undisputed. For me personally, I thrive by myself. I am better off by myself. I'm more productive. I can hear clearly, like my thoughts are clearer, right? I would like to say as well, too, my relationship with God is clearer. All right, let's talk about it, man. Let's talk about it, man. I personally have no problem being alone. I always tell people, man, the things that you think you need two people to do, I can prove to you that you do not. I personally have no problem going to a movie by myself. I'll go to a concert by myself. I'll go to a restaurant by myself. Any activity that you think you need two or more people to do, I could do it by myself. And again, that's just me personally. So when I hear stories about this, of course, we're watching the video again. It comes from Diary of a CEO. The topic is why men have no real friends. Men are saying that they're lonely for X amount of reasons. I personally can't resonate with this because I've learned to thrive in personal development of being alone. I think that's where personal development comes on. And I would also argue and say as well, too, that I think everybody, there should be a chapter, in my personal opinion, there should be a chapter of all of our lives, men, women, young, old. There should be a chapter of our lives where we are alone, where we're in isolation. Because I always say, like, how do you know what you're made of? How do you know your strengths, your weaknesses, if you've never been by yourself, if you've never spent time with your own thoughts, your own ideas? I would argue that at some point in your life, in terms of just talking about personal development, character development, you have to spend some time alone or with minimal interactions, whether from your family or friends, depending on how old you are. Of course, if you're a young kid that still lives at home with your parents, of course, that may be maybe not as easy, whatever the case is, but especially if you're like your middle-aged adult, whatever the case is, I would argue that in terms of just personal development, we should all spend some time alone. So again, I see this title that jumps out to me, and I do empathize, man, because I actually spoke to somebody when I was having those conversations on the app. A brother was telling me, yeah, and I get that. I know a couple people that can't be alone. And I'm not saying these people are less than whatever the case is, but I do think it just is a matter of just like perception, right? Purpose, I usually say as well too, like, it's one or two things that you could be doing in that isolation. If you are somebody that feels lonely, let me use the word lonely, right? There's people, let's use the word lonely because again, I do believe that there's a difference between alone and lonely, right? If you are somebody that feels lonely, there are solutions for that. There are solutions for that. Of course, now, I've been hearing a lot about run clubs. Of course, we got social media, all these apps. You got, easier said than done. I get it. Easier said than done. Especially with the growing generation now, I always argue that I feel like Gen Z is the generation that just lacks communication. They don't know how to talk to one another. If it's not done through a device, if it can't be done with emojis and whatever the case, I feel like Gen Z is the generation that just doesn't know how to communicate with one another. So I do want to be sympathetic to the people who are suffering from loneliness. But on the flip side of that, like I said as well too, I would argue that everybody should be spending some type of time, some period of time to themselves to learn what they're really made of. Learn your strengths in isolation. Learn your weakness. Build a relationship with a higher power. Find your purpose. Find the things that you want to do in this world, man. You have nothing but time and space to do so. Let's watch a little bit more. I won't maybe watch the full thing. Let's watch a little bit more.
My wife would sometimes, when her boys came home from school, she'd sit down directly opposite them, like across the breakfast bar type thing, right? And she'd sit directly opposite and give them protein. And then she'd be like, "How's your day?"
Yeah.
And I don't know. Right? She'd be like, yeah, right. And then later on, we'd be driving somewhere or watching soccer or playing a video game, like shoulder to shoulder. And they'd be like, "Yeah, this weird thing happened today," with her or with me, right? So eventually I said, you've got to stop staring them in the face. That's not how men open up, right?
Pause it right there. It reminds me of a story, right? When I was coming up, and maybe because I've had the best of both worlds, I know what it feels like to have a bunch of friends. Elementary school, middle school, high school, college, a little bit after college, specifically in high school and college, like, there was a period of time where it's just like, when we would link up as boys, there was a group chat. There was boys group chat. I remember we would be going to the movies 2 cars deep. Like, it was a period of time, like, I wouldn't go anywhere less than 2 cars deep. Beach week, senior week, whatever they call it. 2-3 cars deep. I know what it feels like to have friends. Buddies, manses, bros. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But then I also know the other side of the coin as well, too, of just being by yourself. And maybe it comes with old age as well, too. Because a lot of people say, yeah, once you get out of high school, once you get out of college, there's no real opportunity to make real friends, like long-lasting relationships. But again, speaking for myself personally, I think it's what you do with the loneliness that matters the most. It's one thing to be lonely, but it's just like you got to stop and ask yourself, all right, what can I do to alleviate this feeling? And it's just like, again, like, I don't know. I'm trying to be sensitive to this whole situation, but I personally don't necessarily resonate. And I'm not saying that makes me any better, but I don't resonate with people saying they're lonely, because it's just like, bro, there's alternatives. Give yourself a task. Like, you have the right to, like, man, all right, wake up one morning, like, and again, maybe easier said than done. This is like, I don't want to feel like this anymore. I feel lonely. I don't want to feel like this anymore. So starting tomorrow, I'm going to, you know, whatever, fill in the blank. You gotta take action, man. And again, whether you're a young child or grown man, whatever the case is, again, I'm not trying to be insensitive to the circumstance, but same thing. It's like, if you have a job, are you lonely? Do you have a job? Because if anything now, some people feel a certain way about making friends with their coworkers. Some people think there should be a fine line between coworkers and friends, whatever the case is, which I do understand. But it's like, are you lonely at work too? Are you lonely at school too? Are you not talking to anybody if you're still in school? Like, I feel like there's certain areas where you're in social settings that kind of force you to have those interactions. That's how friendships are formed. But why men have no real friends? And I don't want to even just want to say men, because women as well too. I think men and women, especially since like the pandemic, or just maybe even a little bit before that, like, I feel like as we get older, yeah, relationships are going to change, your interests are going to change, priorities are going to change, world views are going to change. Things are going to maybe pull you away from the people that you maybe grew up with, which is almost expected. But again, I think there's a difference of being alone and lonely. Just two different things. You could be alone and not lonely. That is me. Not lonely. But there's alternatives. Again, it's just like just being proactive, man. Easier said than done. Again, I'm not trying to make light of it, but I know pets, animals, people turn to that. Get a dog, get a cat. Maybe, of course, it's not human interaction, but it's a start. Be more proactive in trying to get a girlfriend or a boyfriend if you're a girl. Again, maybe more easier said than done with this whole dating culture and dating app culture and all this fakeness that's going on in the world. So again, easier said than done, but it's a start. I'm saying you just got to be proactive, bro. Like, it hurts me to hear this, man, because again, I know people, like, I've come across people in my day who I know they can't be alone. They can't be alone for extended periods of time, and I can't relate. I can't. But again, that doesn't make me any better. I'm just saying, be proactive, man. In the loneliness, give yourself something to do. Force yourself to get outside of your comfort zone. All I'm going to say is, you can't just let life kick your ass, bro. I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say. Like, you can't just sit by and just let life beat you up. Easier said than done, but if you're lonely, do something about it. If you're bored, do something about it, man. If you're not happy, do something about it. What are you going to do, sit and sulk? I don't know. It's just maybe me, man. I don't know. Again, easier said than done. I'm not saying it's not, because again, I feel like I've come across people in my path that go about it, but also those people have done something about it, man. Okay, you've acknowledged that you're lonely. What are you going to do about it? You got to be more, it's your life at the end of the day, man. You got to be more proactive with how your life pans out, because nobody's going to come save you, especially if you're being quiet about it. Especially if you're, quiet, sulking, not opening up to anybody. Like, you got to be proactive, man. It's first thing acknowledging, hey, man, I'm not happy. Hey, man, I'm bored. Hey, man, I don't know what my purpose is. Acknowledge it and then commit to doing something about it, man. I don't know. Again, I just personally can't resonate with this topic, but I am going to be sympathetic to this topic as well, too, because I do know it's something that's growing across men and women in our society right now, especially in like Gen Z, middle-aged men, this, that, and the other. It's just like, are you going to do something about it, or are you just going to sulk in the reality of loneliness? That's just my thoughts. Of course, I want to hear yours down in the comment section below. As always, the likes, the comments, and subscribes are all greatly appreciated. Let's get into some tunes.